The much anticipated meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and his American counterpart Joe Biden took place on the sidelines of the APEC summit. Over the course of 4 hours at a country estate near San Francisco, the two leaders engaged in discussions aimed at stabilizing China-U.S. relations, evidently the most important bilateral relationship in the world today. To understand the far-reaching bilateral and global implications of this important exchange, we are joined by Ms. Rorry Daniels, who serves as the Managing Director of Asia Society Policy Institute and holds the position of Senior Fellow at the Institute Center for China Analysis. Welcome to CGTN, Rorry.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.
What are your first impressions of the Xi-Biden meeting? What are the key outcomes of this summit in your opinion, and the potential impact on shaping the trajectory of China-U.S. relations from here on?
I think the results of the meeting are quite positive. The two sides have announced progress on areas where the U.S. has long wanted further cooperation with China, including on the issue of fentanyl and fentanyl precursor production in China, including to reestablish military-to-military dialogue, an area where the U.S. wants to be sure that we avoid miscommunications and misperceptions from escalating into military conflict. Both sides seem to come to the table wanting to show the world that they can and will manage this relationship responsibly. So I think the tone overall was candid and constructive. And that, of course, builds on the spirit of last year's Bali meeting and supports further high-level diplomacy, as well as working-level coordination on some of those important issues I mentioned.
President Xi, in his opening remarks, also emphasized that the world is big enough to accommodate both countries, and one country's success is an opportunity for the other, while President Biden highlighted the importance of ensuring that competition does not veer into conflict. How do you interpret this dynamic, and what measures or strategies can both countries employ to strike a balance between competition and cooperation?
Well, I think dialogue and communication are absolutely key to striking that appropriate balance. But as long as we can manage those disagreements through dialogue and communication, I think there is a chance to show both publics in the world that we can manage the relationship responsibly. It's critically important for both sides that they respond to the global need for the U.S. and China to manage that relationship responsibly.
There is a prevailing view among analysts, I believe, that an improved China-U.S. relationship is in the best interest of the global community. Do you share this perspective? And in your opinion, how does the Xi-Biden meeting hold the potential to pave the way for a more positive and constructive relationship between the two nations?
Well, absolutely share the opinion that it's critically important for the world, for the U.S. and China to manage their relationship responsibly. We are facing actual global existential crises right now, including a climate crisis, but also, I think, crises that emanate from food insecurity, from energy insecurity. So there is a ton of problems on the global agenda that we need to solve in the 21st century, or at least we need to manage better. And having the U.S. and China set a stable floor under the relationship not only gives us a better chance to cooperate, coordinate, and deconflict our respective bilateral approaches to those issues, but also sends a signal to the rest of the world that cooperating with the United States on one side or with China on the other is not going to impede their relationship with the other side. The countries of the world don't want to have to choose between the U.S. and China. It's not useful for them to feel as though this is a divided world where the U.S. leads one side and China leads another. It's not useful for the countries of the world, and it's not useful to solving our problems. And I think that's why President Biden and President Xi came to this summit with a clear message that they want to manage this relationship responsibly, that they see dialogue and diplomacy as the pathway forward to doing that, and that it will benefit both peoples in those countries, but around the world.
Next year is critical for U.S. presidential election year. Do you think that the positive tone that was set by the Xi-Biden meeting will continue in the U.S. political discourse, considering we know how vicious the presidential campaigns could get and the rhetorics that come out of the campaigns on China?
I think the U.S. and China are looking at a year ahead where events might play a large role in determining the stability of the relationship. And so it's critically important that this meeting went well, that it was constructive, candid, and opened up these channels of communication that can sustain us through the events going forward in the next year. I think that President Biden was incredibly clear with President Xi that our one China policy has not changed. And that's a very important reassurance right now in a period of potential political turbulence. So I'm very positively impressed by President Biden's clear underlining that while it is a critical United States interest to protect and advance peace and stability in the Taiwan Strait, that the U.S. is not trying to change its one China policy at this moment. I think the Biden administration has determined that having a stable and constructive relationship with China is a position that it can defend throughout this election period. There are going to be a number of statements about China that are made in the contest to win the Republican nomination, and likely additional comments on China as the two nominees compete in the general election. But clearly, the Biden administration has made a calculated and strategic choice that it is good for the American people, for their interests, and therefore for the president's own record to have a stable and constructive relationship with China. And hopefully that momentum will carry throughout the election year and beyond, no matter who is elected president.